All right, I think we're live here. Um, hey, everybody out there. Hopefully, you're logged on now and ready. For anyone who hasn't seen it, my name is Adam Ross, and I'm just going to give people a quick, 30 seconds to a minute to get on here if they're not already there. So, depending on the platform, if you have a comment section, I would love to know maybe who's online right now. You can post your name or your brewery or where you're from. I'd love to find out. Um, and then we can get started in just a few more seconds. Is everyone hearing me okay? If you can hear me, obviously a comment just on that would be great too. Um, okay, I think we're good. Audio is great. All right, awesome. So let's get started. As you can see from the slide, we're going to be talking about your brewery's website and how to maximize all elements of your website, really to do a couple big things. One is to identify who you are and make sure people know your story. Obviously, you want to be selling more beer because that means more cash in your pocket. And then keeping your customers happy is another big one because it's not just a one time that they're going to come to your site, they're going to come back and back. So how do we keep them happy with every visit? So first off, thank you to CBP for hosting this event. Thanks for our sponsor for today, which is the Beer 30 by the Fifth Ingredient. In terms of what we're going to be covering today, it's a little bit about me, the basics of your website, and then we'll get into some of the real kind of heavy stuff as far as what topics you want to be covering on your website, what type of content. So just a little bit of background for me, just so you know, this is not a load of BS. We are from Southeast Florida. We're actually in West Palm Beach, and we run a creative agency here, basically for helping anyone, any small business, but really a lot of breweries and distilleries and people that are in food and beverage, to kind of identify who they are as a business, tell their story a little bit better, and ultimately expand their business by doing those things. So that's what we like to do. We have a small smattering of our work here, so you can see, all sorts of label designs. We do a ton of branding as well for companies. Obviously, we do a lot of websites as well, your merch, ambassador programs, merchandise. So really kind of anything and everything when it comes to breweries. Um, we've worked with over 15 breweries and distilleries. And as far as the services we offer, it really ranges from, a lot of the branding stuff, website design and development, social media, print and packaging, and advertising. So we cover a broad spectrum of things that the brewery industry needs. Um, if anybody has a question along the way, please feel free to chime in the comments, and I would love to answer them. So feel free to stop me at any time. But let's start kind of at the basics, the top level stuff, and talk a little bit about what your website is, what it can be, and kind of the idea of it. And I think one of the best ways for me to relate to your website is that your website is your home turf. There are obviously a lot of different places that you can get your marketing out online, and that's, you've got Google, you've got social media, you've got all sorts of platforms out there, but with your website, it is essentially everything that you want it to be. You control how it looks. You control what people see and when. You can control the photography, the video, the content. So I like to think of it as your home turf where you make the rules. You get full control over everything. And I think that's a very powerful thing to think about, because ultimately that's really how you differentiate your brewery from all the other ones. It really needs to be a vital part of the strategy when it comes to marketing of your website. So your website should really look, sound, and feel like an extension of the brewery. So as much as when people walk through your front door, they get a vibe, you want to have that same vibe on your website. You want to kind of communicate the same thing. And kind of a scary statistic that I believe rings true for almost every brewery that I've ever experienced was that more people will end up at your website than will ever go through your front door in a month. So that's just to hit home on the importance of making your website effective, making it not just effective, but making it great. Because I think when you do that, you turn more of those online visitors into actual visitors. So a couple of the very high level basics that we need to make sure that we have on your website before we get into like the nitty gritty stuff. So First one, and this is just a basic checklist, but if you haven't done one of these things, I'd recommend right after we get done, talking to your web person or doing it yourself if you do it. But is your address easily available and with a link to directions? So again, people need to find you. Are your hours correct? I mean, if you had some different hours changes, through COVID, it's totally understandable. But making sure that those hours are up to date is really vital for all your guests. If you guys are tap room focused, show an events page where you have all the different events. If you have a trivia night, if you have any kind of bingo or anything like that, put those on there. Make sure people can see them because that could be what they're coming for. If you are distribution focused, make sure there's some examples, some photos of your packaged goods so that people could then go find them on store shelves. Have a place for the newsletter sign up. We'll kind of cover that a little bit later, but the idea of email is still vital to the marketing of your business. And when people come to your website, if you can at the very least get them to sign up for your newsletter, you'll be more successful because you can eventually hit them up with an email, a month from now and remind them about you guys. And then obviously your social links. So Instagram, Facebook, whatever accounts that you have, make sure you have links to those because again, those are places where people will then subscribe or follow you and then be able to get updates. So again, screenshot this, make sure that you have all this stuff on your website. It's really important that these things are done before you get to some of the bigger ones. Okay, so let's just talk about, the experience of your website and why that's important. We come from a marketing background, so we know the importance of every touch point along the way, as far as seeing your social, as far as going to your website, as far as walking through the front door and picking up a beer on store shelves. These are all really important touch points along the marketing journey, and your website is going to be another big one of that. So you really, in the grand scheme of marketing, you can't ignore any of these. The more that you hit home on every one of these, the more successful you will be in the eyes of the viewer. So I can't, overestimate the importance of having a website that is not only good, but it's great. Because if you have a great website, you're really going to do you're going to have a big checkbox in terms of converting those people to fans of yours. So really looking at, how do you match up to your competition in terms of their social media versus yours, your website versus theirs. And, just to give you another example, it also carries over to your brewery and making sure that all of the details are paid attention to in your brewery. We had an example of a brewery that was opening up. First day they were open, and there was a major tile crack right at the front step of the brewery. And it's little details like that that I believe really make a total picture of your brewery, and they add up quite a bit. So I encourage you guys to really pay attention to all the details, not just your website, but all of the various components of your marketing. But obviously, website is a crucial part of that. In terms of a takeaway for this, ask someone with website experience who will be honest with you to review your website and give you some feedback. Obviously, I can always help you with that, but I'm sure you have someone that or in your network. Ask them to go to the website, ask their positive, negative feedback. What are their takeaways? What did they remember about the website? What did they not find on the website? I think it'll be helpful to kind of find some of the gaps in what you need to add. So be authentic. I think this is a really big one in terms of differentiating who you are. Obviously, you and all of the breweries around you are creating craft beer at the highest level they possibly can. Everyone wants to make a good beer. And I think that's kind of the one commonality amongst everybody. But what isn't common is obviously what is the personality of the brewery? What is the reason? What is the why behind the brewery? Are they a rock and roll brewery? Are they a tiki brewery? Are they kind of a Americana brewery? Having that story be defined on your website is really important because, again, it gives people something to attach onto. It doesn't mean that you're going to connect with everybody out there, and I think that's okay. You don't need to be a middle of the road, try to accommodate everybody. I think it's really better to have a kind of a defining vision for who you're looking at, and make sure that comes across on your website. I think having that experience come through on your website and then followed up when they walk in the brewery is going to give people a true sense of who you are. So don't ever shy away from that. Um, an important part of this is make sure your story is clearly written somewhere on the website, and make sure your team knows it as well. So, figure out the why, figure out why you guys came to be, what was the motivating kind of passion or reason for it, more than just beer. Obviously beer is kind of the commonality, but beyond that, why did you pick the style of brewery that you have? And again, I think it's important to train your staff on that too. So not only your website communicates it, the look of your brewery communicates it, but also your staff is able to speak to it. Um, Look in the mirror. So basically, identifying what that style might be, and is it intentional? Have you gotten to where you are without really intentionally making these decisions? Have you kind of sat down and thought about what I just talked about? Have you thought about the vision for the brewery? Have you thought about the personality? A lot of people connect with brands that look like them. And that's not to say that you have to look like a certain person, but the idea is that people want to connect with people that they're familiar with or that they understand. Also, when it comes to inconsistencies, so if your website looks like one thing and your brewery looks completely different and your packaged goods look completely different from that, they're going to be able to sort of see that and identify that. And it might be on a very subconscious level, but ultimately, if you're trying to be successful and you're trying to kind of hit a home run in all departments, you want to make sure that those inconsistencies are really minimized and as kind of few and far between as possible. So look at your website, see if you had that. Don't have a bad hair day on your website. So again, you don't want to have broken pages. You don't want to have the last update be 2 years ago. You don't want to have your tap list not be, up to date. You just want to avoid all those things. So at the very least, make sure you're keeping an eye on all that stuff. Another important part is your brand needs to be more than your logo. So the whole thing, the look and feel of your website should be identifiable through more than just your logo. So if you're using red and green and yellow as kind of your primary colors, make sure that your merch also has a similar vibe to it. Make sure your social media has some of that color represented in it. Kind of have that all be connected, and you'll have a stronger brand for it. You'll have a stronger website for it. Okay, so then let's get into some of the content elements of your website and what you want to be talking about, and how. So the first thing is your homepage. Obviously, this is the big one. And I write here, make it a quick trip. We know from statistics, and this is pretty well proven, that the majority of your viewers, over half of them, will never make it past your homepage. That's not a bad thing. It's not, something that you have to be worried about or trying to adjust for. The reality is that people are generally coming for a couple quick pieces of information, and that's all good. So give it to them. Don't worry about kind of taking your tap list and bringing it away from the homepage if you can avoid it. Put it on the homepage if you know that's what they're coming for. If you're distribution focused and you want people to be able to find your beer, make a beer finder section on your homepage. If you have events that you want to highlight, put those on your homepage. I'm a proponent of having a longer scroll homepage these days because I think people are naturally inclined to just flick their finger to scroll through it. So it's not a bad thing. So really try to give people as much of what you can on the homepage, especially towards the bottom. There's going to be an expectation that once they hit your footer, if they haven't found certain key pieces of information, that's where it will be. So things like your address, your hours, and contact info, your social links, even a newsletter sign up. I think all of those things, if you haven't found a place for them along the way in your homepage, make sure that they're at the bottom. That way they'll be at the bottom of every page. But realistically, that's a lot of the stuff that people are looking for. Also, a great opportunity to kind of introduce who you are through photography, through slogans, any kind of quick phrasing that you can do to kind of get people on board with who you are is really important. So make sure you have a nice visual kind of catcher at the beginning. And here's that stat that more than 50% probably won't make it past your homepage. Now, let's just say that they're one of those 50% that do make it past your homepage. Obviously, there's a lot of ground to cover in terms of what you can present to them. So what I do is I have a breakdown here of some ideas for what you could communicate. And these are all pretty critical components, I think, of what it is you should be talking about. Now, Obviously, every brewery is a little bit different, but for the most part, the about page or story or team member page is really vital. People love to know who's behind the beer. They love to know, if there's a picture of kind of the brewery owners on the about page, and then they go into the brewery and they see them there. That's going to be a kind of a really pivotal moment for them, because they're going to see the person who's making that beer back there, or they're going to see the brewer, or they're going to see the team, and they're going to make those connections and feel like they have a closer connection to the brewery itself. So really getting into the story of the brewery, the team, and letting that play out on the about page. You've obviously want to capture some of the information about the beer. So it could be a tap list page, but it also could be, the stories of all of the various beers that you have. Let's say you've got, a core lineup of 10 beers. Those 10 beers really could have identifiable stories behind them, and how they came to be, or how they got named, and why they've been chosen as a core. So I really believe that, giving people a lot of that information is going to help connect them. I also believe in the idea of what, the types of anecdotes that people like to share with their friends when they bring them to the brewery. So, they might be ordering one of your, classic IPAs, and as they sit down and drink it, they're telling the friend next to them the story that they read on your website about that IPA. So having that information available, I think, is great. The archive, if you want to get into it, to kind of be able to trace through all of the various beers that you've brewed over the years, I think is also great. So again, that's just one more piece of content. When you're talking about your website, obviously, if you have to-go options, if you offer growlers, if you offer canned products, any of that should be available on your website so people can find out what's in stock. Also, that, pricing, I think, is always helpful, or hours of availability. Maybe when the new stuff goes on sale would be great. If you offer food, obviously that's a big proponent of a brewery. Or if you have food trucks, or if you have events, where you offer food, put that all on your website. I think very often when people are thinking about going out on a Saturday night and trying to plan their night, food is obviously going to be a component of that. So if you offer a food truck, or if you are a brewery that offers food, having your menu available is really going to be key. News, events, press, and awards. So this gets into a bucket of just kind of the content that can constantly be refreshed on your website, the things that you're posting to as often as you can remember to. But obviously, if you're going to events, if you're going to be, pouring at any kind of, local event, national event, if you've won any awards or are competing in awards, I think it's great to talk about. If you get any press, so let's say your local paper writes a story about you, all of that really should be captured somewhere on your website. There's a number of reasons. One, it just looks good for you guys. It shows that you're active. But two, there's an SEO component of that. So I know some of the guys from SiteSeeker were talking about showing up on Google. And again, Google is really good at indexing your site. And as soon as it goes live, they're going to have an index of it. But if you don't update that site periodically, if you just let it grow stale, Google is not going to be as apt to list you as high as they might if you're constantly adding content to it. So news, events, press, awards are big ones. Careers, I think, a lot of breweries are looking for good staff. You might not be hiring immediately, but I always think it's good to have the careers page, because you never know when you're going to come across that perfect person. So have a form, have some information for people to get about, who you might be hiring at the time, and allow people to submit their contact info to you. And then donation requests. So I know almost every brewery that we've worked with in the past gets a lot of requests for donations. And I think most breweries love to do it. I think most breweries are happy to do it. I think they enjoy getting their product out there. But at the same time, it can be cumbersome if people are just emailing your general inbox with those requests, and you don't know all the information about who they are or what they need. So having a donation request page with all of the various fields on it that you might require really kind of helps filter through some of that and kind of get to the good stuff. And also it kind of can sort of frame it so that people know that you can't, potentially donate to everybody who makes a request. So you can cut some of that off early. So again, the content of your site not only helps visitors, which is a big one, but search engine optimization. So constantly updating your site is going to be vital. So this is a big one that I think a lot of breweries either initially miss out on or don't understand the importance of, and that is photography. As great a design team as I believe we are, we are never going to be as good as a good photograph because photography really does sell your product. So a good set of photos will pay for themselves faster than any new brewing equipment. So I understand that breweries are always investing in new equipment, and the better the equipment, obviously, the better a product you can potentially put out. The same goes for marketing. With photography, I encourage you guys at as early a stage as possible to hire a quality photographer. Um, I will say very often we get people who say, oh, but I know somebody who has a good camera, or, my cousin shoots photographs on the side and has fun doing it. Um, Again, your cousin might be great at photography, and this could be a total kind of overstatement, but um, we really encourage people to find great photographers locally, give them some business, and allow them to photograph your products well, because it will sell your product really faster than if you have bad photography. So um, if you need help finding a local photographer, look at some of the social media pages of some of the other local businesses and finds the ones that have the really good photographs, and you'll generally be able to track down that photographer. So I really encourage you. I probably can't say it enough. If you don't have good photographs of your product, get them shot, and it will pay off. Um, Another great reason to do that is because it's not going to just get used on your website. You're going to use those photos on your social pages. Your Google listing is key as well. You'll notice if you ever add photos to your Google listing, they'll send you the statistics on how many people have viewed that photo, and it's thousands. So obviously, a good photo does a great job of selling you guys, and a bad photo does a bad job. So certainly keep that in mind. And then again, I know everyone's busy. I know that people have a lot of other obligations beyond just their website. So I always encourage businesses to make it as easy as possible to keep their website up to date. So any kind of integrations that you currently have, so any services that you're currently using for things like your tap list for e-commerce, obviously you probably have an Instagram account. Those are all things that you can integrate into your website, and that will automatically update. So your tap list, if you use, Untapped or one of those, they probably have a widget that you can bring into your website that automatically updates. That's going to save you the hassle of having to worry about that. The same goes for if you have merch online and you want to be able to sell it, integrate it with your POS system as much as you can so that all of those payments go directly to the same place. Instagram, you're probably updating Instagram far more than you are your website. So if you want to show an Instagram feed on your website, I think that's a great way to get fresh content. And then obviously make your newsletter service available through there so people can sign up for your newsletter. All right, we're reaching the end. So these are the bonus tips. These are the things that may be a little bit more personal, but I do believe are important. The first is, and I'm sorry for people who are huge proponents of Facebook, but Facebook is dying a slow death, and I mean that in the kindest way. But if you haven't, paid too much attention, that Facebook lately in the news is not really, kind of the crown jewel that it used to be. But also the demographics of Facebook are changing, and people are finding other platforms and other ways to engage. So I would say don't rely on it entirely for your events, for your social media. Kind of branch out as much as you can. Getting back to the idea of capturing emails, your newsletter is a critical part of getting the word out there. So in addition to having your website up to date, capturing emails and getting people that information. Also, phone numbers, I think, is another great way to kind of get people up to date. I know people don't always love it, but they can always opt out. But capture their phone number, send them a text when you have a new event or product release, something like that. I think that's always helpful. As it relates to your website, brand ambassadors, I think, are really kind of one of the unspoken opportunities for a lot of breweries. So if you do have a mug club or something like that, some kind of membership that you offer, don't let that be kind of an afterthought. Really highlight them as much as you can, both in your social media, but also on your website. Identify the various, members if they want. Talk about the events that you're going to have for those members, and really give people the opportunity to engage with you guys through that membership, so that you're constantly bringing new people in and creating these brand ambassadors. So make a page on your website for them, highlight them as much as you can, talk about all the fun stuff they're doing. And that way, when it comes for your renewals, you'll have more people waiting to get on. Make sure you post any photos that you take on your website, but then also on Google My Business. I talked about that. I just know personally some of the results we've gotten from doing that have been astounding. Even I didn't expect it to be as impactful as it is. So definitely take the opportunity to any photos that you capture, put there. Another really helpful little tip I would say is that, to take your brand assets. So the logos, high-res logos, photos that you've captured that, are great. Make them available on your website, potentially make a link in the footer or something like that, so that anyone who wants to use your logo, let's just say there is a local community event and you've sponsored them and they want to put your logo on there, they can grab it off of your website rather than copying and pasting it from some logo, site that they found that's going to be low res, or it's not going to be in the right proportion. So think about getting those logos onto your website. Another little thing is if people are complimenting you on your site, I'd say that's a good job. If you don't hear a lot of feedback on your website, if people just aren't talking to you about it, that's one of those little light bulb moments that you should have and say, hey, how come no one's really talked to me about my website in a while or complimented me on it and said nothing? Generally one of those moments where you should look at your website and go, maybe it's time for a redesign and we should think about talking to someone. So in the end, this is my contact information. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm always happy to kind of review your website, your brand, any of your stuff. If you want me to take a look, I'll be happy to do it for free. So I'll also be posting this online if anybody wants to get a copy. So if you follow us on social, we're at AR Designers, and you can get all that fresh content there. But that was a lot to go over. Obviously, I would assume that there are questions out there. I'm hoping that someone in the audience wants to ask a question or call me on something. I'm always open to opposing views. So anybody out there that has a question? I see Tyler from Modus Brewing is online in Minnesota. Hey, Tyler. I'll give it another couple seconds. But like I said, if not, everybody really pay close attention to your website and the opportunities you have on it. I think it's really vital these days to make sure all of your media properties are functioning well. I think that's a real big differentiator these days in terms of standing out from the crowd. So again, take the time to review your website, look for opportunities to make it better, hire a good photographer, update the content as often as possible, and I think you'll be better for it. So thank you.